Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Last episode we looked at the history of hyperdrives in Star Wars. We did this by combining both Legends and canon material. Now today we're going to take a deeper look at the hyperdrive and explain to you guys how it works. We're also going to look at our own technology here on Earth and explain how close we are to actually creating an FTL drive. In canon, there's not much information about how hyperdrives work. All it says is the machine functions by sending hypermatter particles which hurl the ship into hyperspace while preserving the vessel's mass energy profile. It also talks about a piece of equipment known as the hyperdrive motivator, which launches the ship into hyperspace. But again, there's not much information about it. The one thing that canon does say is that when ships enter hyperspace, they emit what's known as Trinity radiation. Using special sensors, rebels were able to detect this radiation coming off of Vader's fleet before the Battle of Hoth. With our current understanding of the universe, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light in vacuum. But in other mediums, it is possible for the speed of light to be slowed down to the extent that the source of the light travels faster than it. When this happens, a phenomenon known as Trinity Off Radiation or a photonic boom occurs. It's kind of like a sonic boom, but for light. So it makes sense that Star Wars ships, when traveling at light speed, will emit some kind of radiation. Another interesting side note, Trinity Off radiation is oftentimes observed inside nuclear reactors, which use water for moderation. Light travels 25% slower in water than it does in vacuum, so high-energy electrons can travel faster than the light they emit. This causes a photonic boom, which releases Trinity Off radiation. While this reaction mostly releases its energy in the ultraviolet spectrum, some of this energy is visible as bluish light. It's also probably why hyperspace is portrayed as a bluish tunnel of light. Now that's all the information we're going to be able to get out of canon, but luckily there's a lot more information in Legends. And until canon and Legends conflict, I consider most Legends as my personal headcanon. So according to Legends, the hyperdrive works like this. A pilot enters a set of jump coordinates into the ship's main computer, which then feeds that to a paralight system. A paralight system is a device that uses mechanical and electro-optical subsystems to translate the pilot's jump coordinates into the proper format for the hyperdrive motivator to read. The hyperdrive motivator is the primary light speed thrust initiator. It does this by taking gamma radiation collected by the hyperdrive field guide and sending those charged particles through a fusion generator through several kilometers of superconducting material. A device known as the horizontal booster serves as an ignition key and activates the energy in the motivator's ionization chamber, which then releases the radiation through the alluvial dampers, which channel and guide the emissions outwards. The huge amount of energy causes a rip in space-time that allows the ship to obtain speeds that propel it into an alternate dimension known as hyperspace. Before jumping into space, inertial dampers keep the crew and ship from being ripped apart by the massive acceleration of the jump, and once traveling at hyperspeed, they use a null quantum field generator to stabilize the ship. And shielding protects the ship from tiny particles flying through space. While hyperspace was considered an alternate dimension, it corresponded with real-life locations. That means large masses like stars and planets had shadows in hyperspace. Hyperdrives had fail-safes built in which would pull the ship out of hyperspace once it detected the gravity wells of one of these massive objects. Obviously, it's much smarter to plot a course in order to avoid such obstacles rather than jumping blindly and hoping your hyperdrive's fail-safe will save you. The Empire and other factions would develop interdictor machines that generated artificial gravity wells to pull ships out of hyperspace and trap them. But some pilots like Han Solo seem to have been able to disable that function in their ship's hyperdrive, which allowed him to do stuff like jump into the atmosphere of Starkiller Base. Alright guys, if that was super confusing, you're not alone. I think it's because this explanation is full of a bunch of made-up science terms and devices that just don't exist. But on a theoretical basis, here's how Star Wars hyperdrives work. The hyperdrive uses a fictional fuel source called hypermatter. It's what's known as a tachyonic particle, or a particle that travels faster than the speed of light, something that scientists have theorized might exist. This extremely potent source of energy would be used to create a ripple in space-time, which theoretically could change the distance between two objects, allowing for faster than light travel. So, is this even remotely possible? Well, as recently as 2015, scientists have discovered gravitational waves do exist as predicted by Einstein almost a century ago. These guys actually just won the Nobel Peace Prize in physics for it. What happened was more than 1 billion light years away, two black holes were slowly being sucked into each other. When they finally collapsed, they released a huge amount of gravitational energy, which was detected here on Earth 1 billion years later. The scientists used a series of lasers and mirrors to detect a very slight dilation in space-time. For fractions of a second, when the gravitational wave passed over Earth, the distance between this set of mirrors changed less than a fraction of a proton. Nonetheless, it shows that with a strong enough gravitational wave, we could theoretically bend space like a piece of paper and decrease the distance between 2 points. So yes, the idea of bending space-time to allow faster-than-light travel is theoretically possible. But how Star Wars achieves this with its own assortment of made-up fuel and machines is kind of questionable. But I don't blame them because we really have no idea how to achieve this. Currently, NASA scientists are experimenting to see if they can create and detect warping of space at a microscopic level. The hope is to create a warp bubble, which actually functions more like a Star Trek warp drive than a Star Wars hyperdrive. A Star Trek warp drive folds space in front of an object and expands it behind it. So far, one of the breakthroughs that the NASA research team has made is they have determined that the amount of mass energy required to move something at 10 times the speed of light has been decreased from something equivalent to the mass of the planet Jupiter to that of the Voyager 1. Now, this research is all theoretical, but it's super exciting to me that they're even trying to attempt something like this. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed our attempt to connect the real world to Star Wars. It's something we really like doing here on this channel. We like closing the gap between reality and then fiction in our dreams. I mean, we do it with Star Wars content all the time. And the reason we do this is because we want to inspire people to get interested in things like science and technology. Because I know I'm not smart enough to figure out FTL, but maybe someone else will be. And hopefully, you know, in my lifetime, we will have FTL travel. We will go to other stars, other planets, and, you know, I would love to go on an adventure like that. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.